Let me start with something that happened on June 8th, 2026. Donald Trump sat down for an interview with the Financial Times, and he said one sentence, just one sentence. And I want you to hold on to this sentence for the next 20 minutes, okay? He said this. He said, Netanyahu will have no choice. I call the shots. He is not the decision maker, okay? Strong words, very strong. Sounds like Washington is completely in control of the Middle East chessboard, right? Sounds like the most powerful man on the planet is telling his regional partner exactly what to do. And the partner has no choice but to listen. 3 hours after Trump said that sentence, 3 hours, okay? Israel launched dozens of fighter jets and struck military facilities and petrochemical plants deep inside Iranian territory. The White House said nothing, no confirmation, no denial, no press briefing, complete and total silence. And immediately mainstream media across the world ran the exact same headline. Trump has lost control. Netanyahu has defied America. Israel is doing whatever it wants. Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat, jumped on social media right away and wrote this. This war has been humiliating for Trump and American power generally. When Trump announces he's going to call Netanyahu and tell him not to retaliate, and within hours Netanyahu retaliates, the humiliation just compounds, okay? So that is the story that the media wants you to believe. And I understand why people believe it. It has a very satisfying narrative logic to it. The underdog outsmarts the bully. The small country outmaneuvers the superpower. It's a great story. But today I'm going to do something that almost nobody in mainstream media is doing right now. I'm going to put 3 competing theories on the table. I'm going to analyze each one honestly and fairly, using actual data from the last 48 hours. And then I'm going to let you decide which one is closest to the truth. 3 theories. Same set of events. Only one framework that actually explains everything. Are you ready? All right, let's go. Now, before I break down the evidence, I need to introduce you to these 3 theories by name, because if you don't understand the categories, you can't evaluate the evidence properly, okay? First theory is called tail wags the dog. Most of you have probably heard this phrase before. The idea is simple. Normally, the dog wags the tail, right? The dog is in control. The tail just follows. But sometimes in politics, the relationship flips. The small actor, the tail, ends up controlling the big actor, the dog. In this case, the theory says Israel is the tail. America is the dog. And Israel has been wagging America into this war. Netanyahu is craftier than Trump. Israel dragged Washington into a conflict that the United States didn't fully want. And when Trump tried to stop Netanyahu from retaliating against Iran, Netanyahu ignored him, which proves that the tail is wagging the dog, not the other way around. This is the theory that CNN, the BBC, most of the major Western outlets are running with right now, okay? This is the mainstream narrative. The second theory is called anti-tail wags the dog. And this is where it gets more interesting. This theory says, America is not being manipulated by Israel. America is actively using Israel as what we call a proxy, a regional instrument, to carry out strategic objectives that Washington cannot or will not pursue directly. When American and Israeli interests perfectly align, the United States steps aside and lets Israel act. And the public theater of disagreement, Trump saying, don't do it, Netanyahu doing it anyway. That theater gives America the cover it needs. America gets to look like the peacemaker while still achieving its military and geopolitical goals. The third theory, and this is the framework I'm going to build for you today, I call it the theater of consent. This goes one step further than the second theory. It says not only is America using Israel as a proxy, but both parties are jointly choreographing a performance. Each side is playing a different role for a different audience. Trump needs one image for American voters. Netanyahu needs a completely different image for Israeli voters. And critically, both sides needed Iran to retaliate. That retaliation was not an accident. It was the goal. 3 theories. Let's take them one by one. Let me start with theory 1, and I want to be very honest and fair about this, okay? I don't like it when people knock down a weak version of the argument they're disagreeing with. That's not intellectually honest. So let me give you the strongest version of tail wags the dog that I can. Here's the case for it. Trump called Netanyahu directly and told him not to retaliate. Multiple sources confirmed this. American officials said Trump genuinely believed he had convinced Netanyahu to hold off. Trump was so confident that he told the Financial Times on the record he will have no choice. I call the shots. He made that statement publicly before Israel attacked. And then Netanyahu completely ignored him. And that's not even the first time. The week before, Trump had a phone call with Netanyahu that, by Trump's own admission, did not go well. Trump confessed to reporters that he had cursed at Netanyahu, actually cursed at him because of Israeli military operations in Lebanon. The President of the United States was so frustrated with the Israeli Prime Minister that he was swearing at him over the phone. And on top of that, look at the domestic political pressure Netanyahu was under. Naftali Bennett, former Israeli Prime Minister, Netanyahu's main political rival, publicly stated that if Netanyahu followed Trump's wishes and held back, it would prove that Israel was no longer a sovereign state. Think about what that means for Netanyahu going into what's expected to be a very competitive election. He cannot afford to look like he takes orders from Washington. He needs to look like an independent commander who acts on Israel's interests alone. So the logic of tail wags the dog is real. Netanyahu had strong incentives to defy Trump. He has a history of doing exactly that. And the facts on the surface, Trump said stop, Netanyahu didn't stop, seem to confirm the theory. This is a strong argument. It has internal logic. It has evidence, and it explains why many serious analysts in Washington still defend this narrative. But here is the problem. And this is the single most important question in this entire video, okay? So I want you to really pay attention to this. If America genuinely wanted to stop Israel, why didn't it use its actual leverage? Think about this carefully. America provides Israel with almost its entire advanced weapons arsenal. Bunker buster bombs, cruise missiles, precision guidance systems. America operates the air defense network that protects Israeli skies, the Aegis destroyers in the Eastern Mediterranean, the early warning data, the mid-course trajectory tracking. America shares the intelligence that Israel uses to plan every single one of these strike missions. All America had to do was cut off one of these. Just one. And Israel could not have operated the way it did on June 8th. But America did not cut off any of them. Not one. America continued to provide full military cover for Israel, even in the hours immediately following the Israeli attack on Iran. Even after Israel had supposedly humiliated the President of the United States on a global stage, you don't continue to protect someone who just embarrassed you in front of the entire world. Unless you weren't actually embarrassed, unless that was the plan. And this is where we need to move to Theory 2, because Theory 2 has 5 specific pieces of evidence that Theory 1 simply cannot explain Theory 2. And the tail wags the dog. Let me walk you through 5 independent sources. And I want to emphasize this, not from Iran, not from Hezbollah, not from Russia. These are from Western research organizations and from American politicians themselves. Source number 1. The Democracy for the Arab World Now organization, DAWN, based in Washington, the 500.c. DAWN concluded that American policy has transformed Israel from a close ally into what they call a regional proxy force. And they stated directly, they did not hedge this, that the crimes committed by Israel in the region are indistinguishable from American crimes because Israel is executing American objectives. The difference is that no American soldiers are dying in the process. Okay, this is a Washington-based organization saying this, not Tehran, not Moscow, Washington. Source number 2, Al-Shabaka, a Palestinian policy network with international scholars. Al-Shabaka argued that this war is not a spontaneous conflict and not a product of Israeli manipulation. They called it the product of a deliberate strategy. They described it as a joint colonial and imperial project between the United States and Israel, designed to eliminate resistance forces and reshape the entire Middle East region according to their shared interest. Source number 3, and this is where I need you to really pay attention, because this one is extraordinary. United States Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican, one of the most senior and influential voices in American foreign policy. He said this publicly, proudly, on the record. He said that controlling 31% of the world's oil reserves from Iran and Venezuela would be a massively profitable investment. And he called that scenario, are you ready for this? He called it China's nightmare. Okay? Let that land for a moment. An American senator is openly telling the world that the real goal of this conflict is not democracy. not human rights, not stopping nuclear weapons. The real goal is to control 31% of global oil reserves and to create what he calls China's nightmare. This man said the quiet part out loud. And I find it remarkable that this quote is not on the front page of every newspaper in the world right now. Source number 4, the Electronic Intifada. This publication, which specializes in Middle East geopolitical analysis, made the point that I think is the most strategically important of all. They wrote that the war against Iran is not just driven by Israeli Zionism. The deeper cause is American imperialism. And the reason is this: destroying Iran will directly weaken both Russia and China. Think about what that means. Iran is not just a country with a nuclear program. Iran is Russia's strategic partner in the region. Iran is one of China's most important energy suppliers. Iran is a critical node in the supply chain that both Beijing and Moscow depend on. If Iran collapses, Russia and China simultaneously lose a strategic ally, an energy source, and a point of regional influence. That is why Lindsey Graham called this China's nightmare, because that is exactly what it was designed to be. Source number 5, Medical International, a German international health and human rights organization. They offered perhaps the most blunt assessment of all. They wrote that after clearing Gaza, after weakening Hezbollah in Lebanon, and after ending the Assad government in Syria, this is the perfect moment for the United States and Israel to reshape the entire Middle East in their favor. Do you see what that means? This is not a war that broke out by accident. This is not a war that Israel dragged an unwilling America into. This is part 5 of a long-term regional plan, and Israel is the primary instrument of execution. So when you put these 5 sources next to each other, Dawn, Oshibaka, Senator Lindsey Graham himself, the Electronic Intifada, and Medical International, you start to see a very different picture from what the mainstream media is painting for you. The picture is not Netanyahu tricked Trump. The picture is when American and Israeli strategic interests perfectly align, America does not need to stop Israel. America just needs to step to the side and let the tail wag freely, because the tail is doing exactly what the dog wants it to do. Now let me give you the granular data, because theory without data is just storytelling. Okay? And I want you to be able to verify everything I'm saying. Look at the timeline of June 7th specifically. Not one event, not 2. 3 events that happened on the same day, and no major news network is connecting all 3 of them together. Event number 1. On the morning of June 7th, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, to seize and redirect Iranian frozen assets. How much? Between $12 and $24 billion. This money was designated to compensate Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait for war damages. Now, why is this more than just a financial measure? Why is this a weapon? Because for weeks prior to this, through the Pakistani mediation channel, Iran had one non-negotiable precondition for any peace agreement. 1. It was this: release our frozen assets and we will negotiate. Release our frozen assets and we will open the Strait of Hormuz. Release our frozen assets and there is a path to a ceasefire. That was the door. That was the only door leading to any kind of diplomatic resolution. On the morning of June 7th, the United States did not just refuse to open that door. They slammed it shut with $24 billion and handed the key to Riyadh. Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi responded immediately and stated that Iranian assets are not a compensation fund, not war spoils to be distributed. And Iran froze the diplomatic channel on the spot. Now watch the timing. On the same morning that America economically slammed the door on Iran's only diplomatic lifeline, the same morning, the Financial Times published Trump's interview in which he said he was very close to a deal with Iran. Think about that. On the same day you destroy the foundation of any possible deal, you tell the world you're almost done with the deal. That is not a contradiction. That is a performance. Event number 2. Later that same afternoon, Israel bombed the Dahia neighborhood in the southern suburbs of Beirut. 2 people killed, 11 wounded. But here is the critical detail. 5 days before this attack, exactly 5 days, the Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, which is Iran's Central War Command, issued a public warning in 3 languages: Hebrew, Farsi, and Arabic. The warning stated clearly, any Israeli attack on Dahia will immediately trigger Operation True Promise 5, 3 languages, 5 days in advance, broadcast widely. Iran could not have been more explicit about where their red line was. Israel crossed it anyway. Event number 3. The Saudi Arabian television channel Al Hadath reported that Israel had coordinated in advance with the United States on the Beirut strike. American officials did not confirm this. They also did not deny it. In diplomatic language, a deliberate non-denial is not carelessness. It is a statement. If that report were false, the White House would have issued an immediate denial, standard operating procedure. They did not. So on June 7th alone, you have America seizing $24 billion of Iranian assets and closing the economic door, Israel bombing Dahia and crossing Iran's publicly declared red line, and evidence of prior U.S. Israeli coordination that Washington refused to deny. These are not 3 separate stories. These are 3 branches of one plan. Now here is where I want to add a dimension that almost nobody is talking about right now. And this one is going to change the way you understand everything we just discussed. The question is this: why did Iran retaliate so fast? Israel bombed Beirut on the afternoon of June 7th. Within just a few hours, not days, not a week, a few hours, the IRGC had already launched waves of ballistic missiles directly at the Ramat David Air Base in northern Israel. Now normally, for a country to decide to launch ballistic missiles at another country, what do you need? You need a cabinet meeting. You need consultation with the supreme leader. You need to weigh the diplomatic consequences. You need to prepare the operational plan. In any country in the world, that process takes days at minimum. Iran did it in hours. Why? The answer is a military doctrine called Mosaic Defense. Let me explain how this works, okay? Because I think this is one of the most important things I can teach you today. Iran does not have a single centralized command structure for military decisions. Instead, they have 31 provincial IRGC commands. 31. And each one of these commands has what we call pre-delegated authority, meaning they're authorized in advance to independently initiate strikes when a predetermined condition is confirmed. Think about it this way. Imagine you have 31 soldiers standing guard at 31 different locations. And the general already told them, if this specific alarm goes off, you don't call me. You don't ask for permission. You fire immediately. That is Mosaic Defense. And what made True Promise 5 different from all the previous operations, True Promise 1 through 4, is this. The previous 4 operations were reactive. Iran responded after the fact. After something happened, Iran would deliberate, decide, and then act. Normal process. True Promise 5 was different. For the first time in Iranian military history, the operation was pre-announced as a conditional tripwire. The Khatam al-Anbiya command published a trigger condition 5 days in advance in 3 languages for the entire world to see. This meant that when the provincial IRGC commands received confirmation that Israel had bombed Dahia, they did not call Tehran. They did not call the Supreme Leader's office. The confirmation of the trigger event was itself the standing order. They fired automatically. And here is the implication that I want you to sit with for a moment. If Iran's retaliation was automatic, and everyone knew it would be automatic because Iran had announced it 5 days in advance in 3 languages, then the United States and Israel knew exactly what was going to happen. The moment they authorized the Beirut strike, they knew Iran would fire, Israel would then have a justification to escalate directly into Iranian territory, and America will be collecting real-time combat data on Iran's actual remaining missile capabilities, data that contradicted what Trump was telling the public. Because remember, Trump told NBC News on June 7th that Iran's military had been destroyed, that Iran retained only 21 or 22% of its pre-war missile stockpile. His exact words were, "We have totally destroyed their military. They have some missiles left. They have some drones left." But classified American intelligence assessments put Iran's actual remaining capability at 70%. 70, not 21, 70. So either Trump didn't know the real number, or he did know and chose not to say it. Either way, when Iran launched 10-plus ballistic missiles in 3 waves at Ramat David, the Aegis destroyers in the Eastern Mediterranean were feeding real-time tracking data to Israel's Arrow 3 and David Sling systems. Both sides were collecting live performance data from an actual wartime engagement. Iran was being used as a live-fire test target for the integrated American-Israeli air defense network. And Iran didn't even know that was happening when they pulled the trigger. All right? Now let me put theory 3 together, because this is where all of these threads converge. I call it the theater of consent. Here is the core idea. In game theory, when two actors share the same strategic goal, but need to maintain different public images for different audiences, they will stage a visible disagreement while privately coordinating. Think about what each side needed from this situation. Trump needed a specific image. He needed to look like the peacemaker, the deal maker, the man who was trying to end the war. He needed that image for American voters exhausted by military conflict. He needed it for Wall Street investors worried about oil prices. He needed it for NATO allies demanding American leadership and stability. So Trump had to publicly resist Netanyahu. He had to be seen calling Netanyahu and saying stop. He had to be seen being defied. Netanyahu needed a completely different image. He needed to look like the sovereign warrior, the leader who does not bow to any foreign pressure, the man who makes decisions based on Israeli interests alone, regardless of what Washington says. He needed that image for Israeli voters going into what is expected to be a brutally competitive election. And he needed to shut down Naftali Bennett, who was already saying publicly that if Netanyahu follows Trump, Israel is no longer a sovereign state. So when Trump says, I call the shots, and Netanyahu attacks anyway, what actually happened? Trump got footage and quotes for the American media showing his peace effort. Netanyahu got footage and quotes for the Israeli media showing his independence. And the attack happened. Both actors got exactly what they needed. The theater served both audiences simultaneously. And underneath the theater, American Aegis destroyers were still tracking Iranian missiles. American intelligence was still feeding Israeli strike packages. American CENTCOM was still enforcing the naval blockade that neutralized Iran's economic leverage. The theater of disagreement is the mechanism. The strategic coordination is the substance. Now, let me bring all of this together in one picture. And then I want to give you 3 specific things to watch for in the next 72 hours. $12 to $24 billion of Iranian assets seized on the morning of June 7th. Closing the only economic door to negotiations. Israel bombing Dahia that same afternoon. Crossing the red line that Iran had announced publicly in 3 languages, 5 days in advance. 31 IRGC provincial commands firing automatically within hours. Exactly as advertised, exactly as planned. 10 plus ballistic missiles targeting Ramat David in 3 waves. Providing live combat data for the U.S.-Israeli Integrated Air Defense Network. The White House staying completely silent afterward, never once denying prior coordination with Israel. America continuing to protect Israel with full naval and air defense support. Immediately after the supposed humiliation, and Senator Lindsey Graham openly declaring with pride that the real strategic goal is to control 31% of global oil reserves and to create what he called China's nightmare. When you look at all of these facts together, not separately, together, one question becomes unavoidable. If Netanyahu was genuinely defying Trump, why did every single American action on June 7th and 8th serve Washington's long-term strategic interests perfectly? Seizing Iranian assets serves American interests. Triggering Iran's automatic retaliation serves American interests by generating escalation justification. Israel attacking Iranian petrochemical infrastructure serves American interests by degrading Iranian economic capacity. Collecting live Iranian missile data serves American interests for the next phase of the conflict. This is not the result of chaos. This is the result of coordination. Okay? And the Lindsey Graham quote, China's nightmare, 31% of world oil, that is the footnote that Washington accidentally left visible. That is the actual goal. Not Iran's nuclear weapons, not Israeli security, not the people of Lebanon. The goal is to control the energy architecture of the Middle East, to strangle the supply lines that Russia and China depend on, and to do it using Israel as the forward operating instrument. That is what anti-tail wags the dog actually means. The dog is not being wagged by the tail. The dog is letting the tail move freely because the tail is doing exactly what the dog needs done. Alright, we're almost at the end, and I want to give you 3 very specific things to watch for in the next 72 hours. Because this is how you test any geopolitical theory. You make predictions and see if the evidence matches. Prediction number 1. Watch the IRGC statements, not CNN, not Fox News. Read the actual IRGC statements. The IRGC described Operation True Promise 5 as a warning shot. Their message was explicit. This was controlled escalation. If Israel stops attacking Lebanon, Iran stops But if Israel continues to strike Lebanese territory, particularly Dahiyeh, the Mosaic Defense structure will automatically trigger the next chain in the sequence. No deliberation required. No authorization needed from Tehran. So watch whether Israel actually slows down its operations in Lebanon. That is the single clearest indicator of whether Washington genuinely wants de-escalation or whether the escalation ladder is still being climbed on purpose. Prediction number 2. Watch what the White House does not say. If America was genuinely humiliated by Netanyahu, they would issue a formal explicit denial of prior coordination, not through a social media post, not through an anonymous official. A formal on-the-record statement from the State Department or the National Security Council, clearly and explicitly saying, we did not know about the Beirut strike in advance, and we did not coordinate with Israel on the Iranian attack of June 8th. If that statement does not appear within 72 hours, you have your answer. Because governments deny things they need to deny. Silence is consent. Prediction number 3. Watch the oil markets and the treasury market together. Senator Grimm told you the end game. 31% of global oil reserves. Control the energy. Create China's nightmare. If Iran is pushed into a position where it can no longer threaten the Strait of Hormuz, watch who benefits. Not Israel. Not Saudi Arabia. The beneficiary is the petrodollar system. The beneficiary is the flow of capital back into American Treasury bonds. The beneficiary is Washington's ability to fund its debt at favorable rates. Follow the money. That is always the most honest map. Here is your homework. And I'm serious about this. I want you to actually do this. Find the original statement from the Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters about True Promise 5, issued on June 1st and 2nd. Then find the CBS News report on Scott Bessent invoking IEEPA on June 7th. Put the two documents side by side. Look at the timestamps.